The iPhone screen reflects Ji-hoon Park's face as another teenager records him. "Oh my God, look at this beggar!" The girl giggles, zooming in on the soggy cardboard sign. "I need help." Flash. More laughter. A businessman in an Armani coat spits near his feet and quickens his pace. Myeongdong at 11:30 p.m. Light rain. The LED billboards above cast neon reflections on wet concrete. But down here, in this doorway, Ji-hoon discovers what invisible means. A woman clutches her Chanel bag tighter when she sees him. A security guard approaches with that practiced smile that means, "Move along." "Sir, this is private property." "I'll leave," Ji-hoon whispers, struggling to stand. The cardboard disintegrates in his hands. That's when the voice cuts through the rain. "Excuse me." Ji-hoon looks up. A black woman in a beige wool coat stands 3 feet away, holding a brown leather portfolio. She isn't filming. She isn't smiling with pity. She just waits. "May I approach?" 3 words that shatter everything Ji-hoon thought he knew about human interaction. No one had asked permission to get close to him all night. Everyone just decided. To film, to spit, to ignore, to remove. "What's your name?" The question hangs in the air like a lifeline. Ji-hoon takes 3 seconds to remember how to speak. Jin. Jin, I'm Zahara. I brought an extra sandwich from the hotel. Would you accept it? Accept. Not take. Not here, poor thing. Accept. And in that moment, as Zahara extends a wrapped sandwich with both hands, the respectful Korean way, though she's American, Ji-hoon realizes he's about to discover something that will cost his company millions. What if the most expensive lesson in business came from a conversation that cost absolutely nothing? Subscribe now, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about leadership, and you won't want to miss what happens when dignity meets profit. 12 hours earlier, the Park Industries boardroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Ji-hoon adjusted his Patek Philippe and scanned the quarterly social responsibility report. The numbers looked impressive on paper. $2.8 million in homeless shelters partnerships, 47 media mentions of corporate conscience, a 12% bump in millennial consumer approval. "The social experiment is approved," Ji-hoon announced to the nodding executives. "I'll spend 1 night undercover to understand our policies firsthand." Chairman Park, his father, barely looked up from his Wall Street Journal. "Make sure the photographer captures good angles. We need this for the annual report." Min-joon, his secretary, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, what if what? I've prepared for this." Ji-hoon straightened his tie. 1 night, controlled environment, perfect story for stakeholders. 3 hours later, he understood he knew nothing. Now, sitting on wet pavement beside Zahara, Ji-hoon watches her unfold a hand-drawn map from her portfolio. The paper is covered in neat handwriting, arrows and symbols he doesn't recognize. "This is Seoul's dignity map," Zahara explains, pointing to red dots. "Shelter locations with the shortest wait times. Green marks are 24-hour bathrooms that don't require purchase. Blue shows warm spaces open after 10 p.m. "You drew this?" "I'm an urban planner. I've been consulting with the city on housing first policies." She traces a route with her finger. "But I noticed something interesting about the buildings you'll pass tonight. Most belong to Park Industries." Ji-hoon's chest tightens. Park Industries? The same company that installed those spikes on the overpass ledges last month, and those benches with armrests designed to prevent lying down. Zahara's voice remained steady, professional. Hostile architecture. "It's called designing poverty out of sight." The sandwich turns to cardboard in his mouth. Those are safety features. For whom? Zahara meets his eyes. Jin, I'm going to tell you something, and I hope you'll listen with an open mind. She pulls out her phone, but instead of filming, she shows him a photograph. The Park Industries building at night, its glass facade gleaming. Below, in the shadow, a woman sleeps on a cardboard mat. This was taken last week. Right outside your... Zahara pauses, studying his face. Right outside their headquarters. She's a veteran, 47 years old. She cleans offices during the day and has nowhere to go at night because the shelter waitlist is 3 months long. Ji-hoon stares at the image. In the background, through the glass, he can see the warm glow of the executive offices. His office. What's her name? Mrs. Kim. She has a master's degree in literature. Does she... Ji-hoon swallows. Does she know who owns the building? Does it matter? She's been invisible for 2 years. Invisible. The word cuts deeper than the rain soaking through his borrowed coat. Zahara folds the map carefully. Jin, if you really want to understand what it's like to need help, there are 3 steps to receiving dignity. First, someone asks your name. Second, they ask permission before acting. Third, they offer choice instead of charity. She stands, extending a business card. Housing First Consultant. If you ever meet someone who actually has the power to change policies, tell them about Mrs. Kim. As Zahara disappears into the night, Ji-hoon stares at the business card. Zahara Williams, Urban Solutions Architect. At the bottom, a small notation. Dignity is not negotiable. He doesn't know it yet, but he's holding the blueprint for the most expensive transformation in Park Industries history. The rain falls harder, and for the first time in his life, Ji-hoon understands what it means to have nowhere to go. The Park Industries elevator has never felt slower. Ji-hoon stares at his reflection in the polished steel doors, but all he sees is Mrs. Kim sleeping on cardboard. The executive washroom, heated floors, Italian marble. Everything feels obscene after 6 hours on the street. Minjun waits with fresh clothes and coffee. Sir, the morning briefing is ready. The social media team prepared several post options for the... Cancel everything. Sir? Cancel the posts. Cancel the meeting. And Minjun? Ji-hoon strips off the damp coat that still smells like rain and shame. Get me everything we have on hostile architecture. Every spike, every armrest, every design feature intended to prevent people from resting. I don't understand. Neither did I. Until last night. The shower water runs scalding hot, but it can't wash away the memory of Zahara's 3-step dignity framework. Name, permission, choice. 3 concepts that apparently don't exist in the Park Industries vocabulary. 20 minutes later, Ji-hoon bursts into the executive conference room, where the marketing team has spread glossy mock-ups across the mahogany table. Compassionate CEO walks in their shoes, reads one headline. A staged photo shows Ji-hoon handing out food packages, perfect lighting, perfect smile. We're thinking of a 3-part social campaign, explains marketing director Lee, clicking through slides. The overnight experience, the employee volunteer program, and the grand gesture. Maybe a new shelter with the Park Industries logo. How much? For maximum impact? 8 million, spread across 6 months. The ROI on brand perception alone. How much to remove every hostile architecture feature from our buildings? The room falls silent. Lee blinks. Sir. Spikes? Armrests on benches. Barriers preventing people from taking shelter. How much to remove all of it? Minjun pulls up figures on his tablet. Sir, those features cost approximately 1.2 million to install across our properties. But removal would be complicated. City permits, insurance liability, shareholder questions, and replacing them with actual benches, actual shelter areas. That would be, Minjun calculates frantically, 14 million, minimum. The marketing team exchanges worried glances. This isn't how the script was supposed to go. Sir, Director Lee ventures, the social media campaign would generate much more buzz for significantly less investment. Show me the numbers on Mrs. Kim. Who? Ji-hoon walks to the window overlooking the plaza below. In daylight, it's beautiful. Manicured gardens, flowing fountains, curved benches with deliberate armrests every 3 feet. No place for anyone to lie down. Mrs. Kim, 47, literature degree, sleeps outside our building every night while we debate campaign budgets in here. The silence stretches long enough to hear the air conditioning cycling. Sir, Minjun says carefully, there's no Mrs. Kim in our beneficiary database. Because she's not a beneficiary. She's a casualty. Ji-hoon turns back to face the room. I want proposals for complete hostile architecture removal on my desk by 5 p.m. I want shelter consultation with actual homeless advocates, not our marketing firm. And I want to understand why we're spending $8 million to look compassionate instead of $14 million to actually be useful. Director Lee clears her throat. Sir, with respect, shareholders expect measured social responsibility, brand-forward charity, not structural activism. And then maybe it's time to change shareholder expectations. As the meeting dissolves into worried murmurs, Ji-hoon's phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. The Korean CEO who spent last night on Myeongdong Street. We know who you are. Interested in an interview? His blood turns cold. Someone filmed more than just mockery last night. But before panic sets in, a second message arrives. This is Zahara. I hope Jin made it through the night safely. The offer to consult on real policies stands. Dignity is not negotiable. 2 messages, 2 completely different futures. The expensive transformation has already begun, and there's no going back. The press conference at the Kyungrae Soh Ballroom has everything. Crystal chandeliers, 200 journalists, and a $2.8 million social media campaign about to launch. Ji-hoon stands behind the podium, looking at the sea of cameras pointed at him like loaded weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, he begins, reading from the teleprompter. Park Industries is proud to announce our expanded social responsibility initiative. In the audience, Chairman Park nods approvingly from the front row. The marketing team holds their breath. Stock prices have already ticked upward in anticipation. Our research shows that strategic philanthropy, combined with employee volunteer programs, creates measurable impact on both community welfare and corporate reputation. Ji-hoon pauses. The words taste like cardboard in his mouth. In the back of the room, he spots a familiar figure, Zahara, holding her brown leather portfolio, wearing the same beige coat from last night. She isn't smiling. She's taking notes. Which is why we've prepared a comprehensive campaign to address homelessness through targeted partnerships. And his phone buzzes against the podium. A new message. Mrs. Kim slept in the rain last night while you rehearsed this speech. The silence stretches 3 seconds too long. Cameras click. Actually, Ji-hoon says, abandoning the teleprompter, I need to cancel this announcement. The ballroom erupts. Journalists start shouting questions. Chairman Park's face goes pale. The marketing director frantically signals from the wings. The initiative I was about to announce would cost $2.8 million and help approximately nobody. Ji-hoon's voice carries over the chaos. Instead, Park Industries will be implementing immediate structural changes to our properties. We're removing hostile architecture features from all our buildings and creating actual shelter spaces. A reporter in the front row stands. Mr. Park, are you saying your previous social programs were ineffective? I'm saying I spent last night learning the difference between charity and dignity. And the lesson was taught by someone much smarter than anyone in this room. The cameras swivel to follow his gaze towards Zahara, who looks surprised to be suddenly in focus. Miss Williams is an urban planning consultant who showed me a map last night. Not a marketing map, a dignity map. She'll be leading Park Industries' new approach to housing first policies. Zahara's eyes widen. They've never discussed her leading anything. Another reporter jumps up. Mr. Park, what exactly happened last night? There are rumors you were seen. I was seen being humiliated, ignored, and treated as less than human. It was the most valuable education I've ever received. Ji-hoon closes the prepared speech folder. This company will now invest $14 million in removing barriers instead of building brands. The questions come like machine gun fire. What about shareholder approval? How will this affect quarterly projections? Is Park Industries shifting away from profit-focused policies? Sir, your father looks concerned. Ji-hoon glances at Chairman Park, whose face has shifted from pale to red. My father and I will have that conversation in private. But Mrs. Kim, a literature master's degree holder who sleeps outside our headquarters, deserves better from all of us. As security starts moving toward the podium, Ji-hoon makes direct eye contact with Zahara. Miss Williams, would you accept a formal consulting position to oversee this transformation? Full autonomy, adequate budget, and public accountability. The room holds its breath. Zahara stands, portfolio in hand. Mr. Park, I appreciate the offer, but grand gestures announced without consultation rarely translate to genuine change. The cameras swing between them like a tennis match. You're saying no? I'm saying prove it's real first. Remove the spikes. Open the warm spaces. Show measurable change for actual people. Then we can discuss partnership. With that, she walks toward the exit, leaving 200 journalists and one mortified CEO in her wake. As the ballroom dissolves into chaos, Ji-hoon realizes he's just committed his company to millions in unplanned spending, publicly embarrassed his father, and been rejected by the one person whose help he needs most. Min-jun approaches the podium. Sir, Chairman Park requests an immediate family meeting, and the stock price just dropped 12%. Through the confusion, Ji-hoon watches Zahara disappear through the exit doors. She didn't film his humiliation. She didn't capitalize on his vulnerability. She just held him accountable to be better. For the second time in 24 hours, Ji-hoon understands what dignity actually costs. And this time, it might bankrupt him. The Park family meeting happens in the private dining room on the 47th floor, where Ji-hoon grew up learning that business decisions are made over perfectly arranged hanjeong-sik. Tonight, the table feels more like a tribunal. Chairman Park hasn't spoken in 7 minutes. He just stares at his untouched soup, while Min-jun reads stock market updates in a whisper. Down 18%. Bloomberg calling it corporate suicide by conscience. 3 board members have called emergency meetings. Father, 14 million. Chairman Park's voice cuts like ice. You committed $14 million to what? Removing safety features? Creating liability risks? For strangers? For Mrs. Kim? For people like her? There is no Mrs. Kim. The elder Park slams his palm on the table. There are only profit margins and shareholder obligations and the empire I spent 40 years building, which you just endangered in one press conference. Ji-hoon sets down his chopsticks. Father, last night I sat in the rain outside our building while people filmed me for entertainment. A security guard told me to move along from property we own. And the only person who treated me like a human being was someone who immediately recognized the hypocrisy of our social policies. You went undercover for one night. One night. And you think that makes you an expert on homelessness? No. It makes me an expert on humiliation. And I learned that our company is very good at inflicting it. Min-jun clears his throat nervously. Sir, there's another issue. The journalist who texted about knowing your identity, they're from SBS News. They have photos. Chairman Park goes completely still. What kind of photos? The young chairman, on the street, with the cardboard sign, and with the American consultant. Show me. Min-jun reluctantly slides his tablet across the table. The photos are grainy, but clear. Ji-hoon in dirty clothes, Zahara kneeling beside him with the map, their heads bent together in conversation. The final image shows her walking away while he stares after her, holding her business card. This looks like a romantic scandal, Chairman Park says slowly. It's not. I don't care what it is. I care what it looks like. The patriarch stands, pacing to the window. A Korean CEO and a black foreign consultant, meeting secretly at night. Followed by a press conference where you publicly defer to her expertise and offer her unlimited budget and authority. The implications settle over the room like smog. Father, you're misunderstanding. Am I? Because from where I sit, my son just destroyed a carefully managed corporate image for a woman who publicly rejected him on live television. Min-jun's phone buzzes insistently. Sir, I'm getting calls from SBS, KBS, and Yonhap. They all want statements about the nature of your relationship with Miss Williams. There is no relationship. She offered me a sandwich and taught me about dignity. That's all. That's all? Chairman Park laughs bitterly. Son, dignity doesn't show up on quarterly reports. Dignity doesn't pay employee salaries or fund R&D or maintain the lifestyle that has given you every opportunity you've ever had. Maybe that's the problem. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Chairman Park returns to his seat, picks up his phone, and dials. Board meeting, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Father, I'm calling a vote of no confidence. If you want to bankrupt this company for strangers, you'll do it without our name on the building. As the call connects, Ji-hoon realizes that saving Mrs. Kim might cost him everything his family built. But as he looks out at the Seoul skyline, thousands of lights in warm windows, and somewhere in the darkness below, people with nowhere to go, he can't bring himself to regret the choice. The most expensive lesson in business is learning that some things can't be bought, even if it means losing everything else. Zahara's hotel room at the Conrad overlooks the Han River, but she isn't enjoying the view. Her laptop screen shows 17 news articles about yesterday's press conference, and every headline makes her stomach clench tighter. Mystery consultant rejects CEO's public proposal. American woman behind Park Industries scandal. Who is Zahara Williams? The knock at her door comes at 7 a.m. Through the peephole, she sees Min-jun holding a coffee tray and looking exhausted. Miss Williams, I'm Min-jun, Chairman Park's secretary. Could we speak privately? She opens the door. If this is about yesterday, it's about Mrs. Kim. That stops her. Min-jun enters, setting down the coffee with the careful precision of someone who hasn't slept. Chairman Park, the young chairman, he didn't sleep last night. He's been researching every person who sleeps rough around our properties. Mrs. Kim is real. Literature degree from Yonsei University. Lost her job 3 years ago when her company downsized. Daughter died in a car accident. Husband left. No family support. Zahara sits heavily. Why are you telling me this? Because in 8 hours, the Park Industries Board will vote to remove him as CEO. And because he asked me to give you this. Min-jun hands her a thick folder. Inside are architectural plans, budget projections, and detailed removal schedules for hostile architecture across 37 park properties. The numbers are staggering. Every spike, every armrest, every barrier meticulously catalogued for elimination. He stayed up all night working on this, with the entire facilities team, plus legal approval for temporary shelter permits, partnerships with local NGOs, and budget allocation for 24-hour warming centers. Min-jun pauses. Miss Williams, he also asked me to tell you that he understands if you can't accept the consulting position. The media attention, the family pressure, the public scrutiny. It's not what you signed up for. Zahara flips through the plans. They're thorough, practical, and expensive. This isn't performative charity. It's structural change. What's his backup plan if the board votes him out? He doesn't have one. His father controls 43% of voting shares. With board support, that's enough to remove him. And replace him with someone who'll cancel all these changes. Within a week, yes. Zahara closes the folder. Mr. Min-jun, what do you think of your boss? I think he learned something on that street that he couldn't learn in business school. And I think... Min-jun hesitates. I think Mrs. Kim deserves more than good intentions. She deserves results. Yes, ma'am. Zahara stands, checking her watch. The board meeting is at 9. Yes, but Miss Williams, the media will be watching. If you show up, they'll assume I'm doing my job. Zahara picks up her portfolio and the architectural plans. Mr. Min-jun, please tell your chairman that his dignity consultant accepts the position. Conditional on one requirement, which is, Mrs. Kim gets the first warm bed in the first shelter that opens, tonight, before we hold any more press conferences or board meetings or family councils. Zahara moves toward the door. Dignity isn't negotiable, and it doesn't wait for shareholder approval. As she heads for the elevator, Zahara can hear her phone buzzing with calls from reporters. Let them call. Some conversations are more important than public relations. In 3 hours, she'll walk into the most hostile boardroom in Seoul. But first, she has a map to redraw. And Mrs. Kim has waited long enough. The Park Industries boardroom at 8:47 a.m. feels like a funeral home. 12 board members sit in black suits around the mahogany table, reviewing documents that will determine the company's future. Chairman Park presides from the head, his face carved from stone. Ji-hoon enters with Min-jun, both carrying boxes of architectural plans and budget projections. The numbers are worse in daylight. $14.2 million for hostile architecture removal, $8.7 million for shelter conversions, $3.1 million annually for warming center operations. Gentlemen, Chairman Park announces, we're here to address my son's recent episode of conscience. Board member Kim Sung-ho, representing the pension fund investors, speaks first. Chairman, the stock price has stabilized somewhat, but institutional investors are concerned about fiscal responsibility. The fiscal irresponsibility, adds Director Lim, of spending $26 million on infrastructure that provides no return on investment. Ji-hoon stands. Honorable board members, may I present the actual cost analysis? He opens the first box, spreading architectural photographs across the table. They show Park Industries properties from street level, bus stop shelters with deliberate gaps preventing lying down, benches with armrests every 18 inches, smooth concrete slopes under overpasses designed to prevent sitting. This is what we currently own, Ji-hoon says. 47 separate hostile architecture installations, designed to make human beings uncomfortable. Board member Park, no relation, adjusts his glasses. Those are safety and maintenance features. For whom? Mrs. Kim has arthritis from sleeping on concrete for 2 years. Safety for her would be a place to lie down that doesn't require trespassing. Who is Mrs. Kim? Director Lim asks. Ji-hoon opens his laptop, projecting a photograph onto the wall screen. Mrs. Kim sits in a convenience store, reading a paperback novel, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She's well-dressed, well-groomed, and looks like someone's aunt. Literature professor, published poet, lost everything when her daughter died and her marriage collapsed. She spends 12 hours a day applying for jobs and 12 hours looking for somewhere safe to sleep. The room shifts uncomfortably, and this is where she sleeps. The next slide shows the concrete alcove outside Park Industries headquarters. Every night, for 7 months, while we spend millions on campaigns about corporate social responsibility, Chairman Park interrupts. Son, individual stories don't justify structural financial. The boardroom door opens. Zahara enters, wearing a navy blue suit and carrying her portfolio plus the architectural plans Min-jun delivered this morning. All conversation stops. Gentlemen, she says with a slight bow, I apologize for interrupting. I'm Zahara Williams, the urban planning consultant your chairman, the young chairman, has asked to evaluate Park Industries' proposed structural changes. Director Lim recovers first. Miss Williams, this is a private board meeting concerning public infrastructure changes that affect municipal policy and housing law. As a consultant hired by Park Industries, I believe I have standing to present relevant data. She moves to the projection screen, connecting her laptop without asking permission. May I show you what dignity looks like when it's measured? The first slide shows a map of Seoul with red dots marking Park Industries properties. The second overlays green dots showing homeless shelter locations. The patterns don't match. Your properties create a shelter desert in 3 districts. People can't access services because your hostile architecture prevents them from resting between locations. The third slide shows numbers. Average wait time for shelter beds, 73 days. Average time someone can rest on Park Industries property before being moved along, 12 minutes. Board member Kim coughs. Miss Williams, what's your proposed solution? Remove barriers. Create way stations. Partner with existing services instead of replacing them. Zahara clicks to the next slide. A budget breakdown. Mr. Park's numbers are actually conservative. Full implementation would cost less than this year's marketing budget. And the return on investment? Asks Director Lim. Reduced security costs, improved community relations, tax benefits for municipal partnership, and compliance with emerging Housing First legislation. Zahara meets each board member's eyes. Plus, Mrs. Kim gets to sleep indoors. Chairman Park stands slowly. Miss Williams, your presentation is thorough. But this board makes decisions based on fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, not individual cases. I understand, which is why I brought this. Zahara's final slide shows a legal document. Seoul Metropolitan Government Housing First Compliance Act, effective January 2026. Companies with hostile architecture will face penalties starting at $2 million per installation. The room goes dead silent. Gentlemen, you can remove these features voluntarily now, or be forced to remove them next year at double the cost plus legal fees. The choice is yours. As the implications sink in, Ji-hoon realizes Zahara just saved his company from bankruptcy while giving Mrs. Kim a warm bed. Sometimes dignity is the most profitable choice after all. At 2:17 p.m., the first spike comes off. Ji-hoon stands in the drizzle watching a construction crew use bolt cutters on the metal barriers under the Gangnam overpass. Each piece of hostile architecture makes a satisfying clang as it hits the dumpster. Zahara stands beside him, checking items off her tablet as they fall. Bench armrests, section C7, removed. Defensive spikes, northwest corner, removed. Anti-skateboarding knobs, removed. She looks up at the crew foreman. How many more locations today? 14, ma'am. We'll finish the Gangnam district by evening. The transformation is immediate and startling. Without barriers, the space under the overpass reveals itself as it was meant to be. Shelter from weather, protection from wind, and room for human beings to exist without apology. Ji-hoon's phone buzzes. Min-jun calling from the office. Sir, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Chairman Park just received a call from Mayor Lee's office. Apparently, there's been a complaint about unauthorized removal of public safety infrastructure. Zahara overhears and frowns. Those installations were on private property. That's what we thought. But building management claims the spikes and barriers were installed at city request for public order maintenance. Ji-hoon and Zahara exchange looks. We're coming back, he tells Min-jun. 20 minutes later, they're in the Park Industries legal department, reviewing property deeds and city permits with the head counsel, Mr. Yoon. The situation is complicated, Yoon explains, spreading documents across his desk. Technically, the hostile architecture was installed through a public-private partnership. The city suggested the features, Park Industries funded them, and both parties benefited from reduced loitering complaints. So we can't remove them without city approval? Ji-hoon asks. We can, but the city can request replacement at our expense if complaints increase. Zahara studies the permits. These are signed by Councilman Hwang from the 4th District. When? 2 years ago, right after the shelter waitlist exceeded capacity. So the city's solution to overcrowded shelters was to make sleeping rough impossible. Effectively, yes. Ji-hoon slumps in his chair. We're stuck. Not necessarily. Zahara pulls out her phone, scrolling through contacts. Councilman Hwang is up for re-election next year, and Seoul just announced the Housing First initiative I mentioned to the board. He'll need demonstrable progress on homelessness policy. She dials. Councilman Hwang? This is Zahara Williams, urban planning consultant. I believe we have an opportunity to discuss mutual benefits regarding Park Industries' infrastructure modifications. The conversation lasts 12 minutes. Zahara speaks mostly in Korean, with occasional English phrases that make Yoon's eyebrows rise. When she hangs up, she's smiling. Councilman Hwang will co-sponsor a press conference tomorrow announcing Seoul's pilot program for dignity-centered public spaces. Park Industries will be the flagship partner. What did you promise him? Ji-hoon asks. Measurable results, reduced security costs, and positive media coverage during an election year. Zahara stands. Plus, Mrs. Kim gets her bed tonight. Tonight. The temporary warming center in your building's ground floor conference room, fully permitted as of an hour ago. Capacity for 12 people, 7 days a week, until permanent facilities open. Mr. Yoon looks stunned. You got city approval to operate a shelter in our headquarters. Emergency housing provisions under existing municipal codes. Completely legal, completely temporary, and completely necessary. As they leave the legal department, Ji-hoon realizes he's watching a masterclass in strategic problem-solving. Zahara didn't just remove the spikes. She transformed them into stepping stones towards something better. How did you know Councilman Hwang would agree? Because politicians need wins more than they need philosophy. And Mrs. Kim deserves better than philosophy. Through the conference room windows, they can see construction crews still working in the plaza below. Each removed barrier opens space for human dignity to exist. Sometimes the most radical act is simply getting out of the way. The temporary warming center opens at 8 p.m. in Park Industries' ground floor conference room. Ji-hoon arrives early to help Min-jun arrange 12 cots, blankets, and a small kitchenette where volunteers can serve hot meals. "Sir," Min-jun says, adjusting the last folding table. "Are you sure about this? Using the conference room where we hold board meetings?" "Where we held board meetings. After today, I think we need a different approach to corporate governance." The first resident arrives at 8:23 p.m. Mrs. Kim, carrying a worn backpack and looking uncertain. Zahara greets her at the entrance with a warm smile and a clipboard. "Mrs. Kim? I'm Zahara. We spoke earlier. Welcome to your first night indoors." Mrs. Kim bows formally, then hesitates. "Are you certain this is permitted? I don't want to cause trouble for anyone." "You're not causing trouble. You're helping us remember what buildings are actually for." Ji-hoon approaches, and Mrs. Kim's eyes widen with recognition. You're the young man from Myeongdong." "Jin? Actually, I'm Ji-hoon Park. I own this building. And I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing. Miss Zahara already explained about the experiment." "Not for the experiment. For the 2 years you slept outside while I held meetings about social responsibility 40 floors above your head." Mrs. Kim sets down her backpack and studies his face. "Mr. Park, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you were sitting in the rain with that cardboard sign, what did you learn?" Ji-hoon considers the question seriously. "That I was never actually homeless. I was performing homelessness. There's a difference." "What difference?" "Performance has an ending. You have something real." Mrs. Kim nods slowly. "And what will you do with what you learned?" "Make sure other people don't have to teach me the same lesson twice." By 9 p.m., 8 people have checked into the temporary shelter. Ji-hoon recognizes 3 of them from his night on the street, including the security guard who had told him to move along. "Mr. Park?" The guard approaches nervously. "I'm very sorry about last week. I didn't recognize. You were doing your job. A job I created." Ji-hoon extends his hand. "What's your name?" "Cho Min-seok. I lost my apartment last month. Divorce, child support. I've been sleeping in the security office, but that's not sustainable." "Mr. Cho, would you accept a consulting position?" "Sir?" "We need someone to manage overnight operations here. Someone who understands both security protocols and resident dignity. Salary position with housing allowance while you get back on your feet." Cho Min-seok stares. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice. Same thing Miss Williams offered me." As the evening progresses, Ji-hoon watches Zahara move through the space with quiet efficiency. She knows everyone's name, dietary restrictions, and medication schedules. This isn't charity for her. It's professional practice. "How long have you been doing this work?" he asks during a quiet moment. 15 years. Started in Detroit after graduate school. Public housing policy, then private consulting when cities couldn't afford full-time planners. And Seoul? 3-month contract with the metropolitan government. Extended to 6 months after I saw how much work needed doing. She pauses. "Your company wasn't part of the original scope. What changed?" "You asked my name instead of filming me. Small gesture, but it suggested capacity for growth." At 10:30 p.m., Chairman Park arrives unannounced. He stands in the entrance, taking in the scene. Corporate executives serving soup to homeless residents, business presentations happening alongside chess games, Mrs. Kim reading poetry aloud to a small group gathered around her cot. Ji-hoon approaches his father. "You disapprove." I don't understand. This morning you were facing a vote of no confidence. Tonight you're operating an unlicensed shelter in our headquarters. Licensed as of 4 p.m. And profitable as of next quarter, once the tax benefits and reduced security costs show up in accounting. Chairman Park watches Zahara demonstrating the coffee machine to Mr. Cho. She's remarkable. She's right. About dignity, about policy, about measurable change. And about you? Ji-hoon follows his father's gaze. What about me? Whether you're ready to lead a company that actually changes things instead of just talking about it. As if summoned by the conversation, Zahara approaches with her evening report. 12 residents checked in. Hot meals served. Medication reminders completed. Tomorrow's job interview transportation arranged for 4 people. Miss Williams, Chairman Park says formally, my son tells me you've revolutionized our approach to social responsibility. Your son revolutionized it. I just provided the map. The same map you drew for him on the street? The same principles, just bigger scale. Chairman Park nods slowly. Then perhaps it's time for an even bigger scale. He turns to Ji-hoon. Son, the board voted to confirm you as CEO this afternoon. Unanimous decision after Miss Williams' presentation. Ji-hoon stares. But you called a vote of no confidence. I called a vote of confidence. In your judgment, your integrity, and your partnership with exceptional consultants. As the weight of the day settles over the warming center, Ji-hoon realizes that the most expensive lesson in business wasn't about money at all. It was about learning to ask the right questions. And Mrs. Kim sleeps warm tonight because someone finally did. 3 weeks later, the signs go up across Seoul. Warm Space 22, EU6 EEE'd, in Korean, English, and pictographs showing a bed, a cup of coffee, and an open door. The Park Industries pilot program has expanded from 1 conference room to 12 locations across the city. Ji-hoon visits each site during the overnight hours, learning names and stories that never appeared in quarterly reports. At the Gangnam location, he finds Zahara reviewing intake logs with the night coordinator. Average capacity, 87%. 0 incidents requiring police intervention. 3 residents have found permanent housing. She looks up from her tablet. How are the shareholders responding? Better than expected. Turns out, first company to comply with incoming legislation is good for stock prices. Ji-hoon sits beside her on one of the new benches, designed for comfort, not deterrence. Plus, the mayor wants to expand the program citywide, using Park Industries as the model, using you as the consultant. Zahara sets down her tablet. That's a big contract. Big enough to keep you in Seoul permanently? The question hangs between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Ji-hoon, we should talk about the media situation. For 3 weeks, Korean entertainment news has been speculating about their relationship. Photos of them working together at shelter sites, sharing coffee during late-night planning sessions, and attending city council meetings have fueled tabloid headlines about the CEO's American romance. What about it? I'm getting interview requests, publishers wanting to buy the rights to the Dignity Consultant story. A film producer called yesterday. Ji-hoon tenses. And I keep saying no. This isn't entertainment. It's policy reform. But the attention could be useful for your consulting business. Zahara studies his face in the harsh fluorescent light of the shelter. Is that what you think this is? A business opportunity? I think you're brilliant at your job. I think Seoul needs your expertise. And I think... He pauses, choosing words carefully. I think Mrs. Kim was right about learning the difference between performance and reality. What do you mean? When I was on that street, everything was performance. the humiliation, the revelation, even asking for help. It was all research for a predetermined conclusion. Ji-hoon watches residents settling into their evening routines. But this isn't performance anymore. These people matter to me now. Not as symbols or case studies, but as neighbors. And me? You matter as someone who sees what needs fixing and knows how to fix it. Everything else is what? Complicated. Zahara laughs, the first genuinely relaxed sound he's heard from her in weeks. Complicated how? I'm Korean, you're American. I run a chi bowl. You reform chi bowls. I was raised to see corporate responsibility as brand management. You see it as moral obligation. He counts off on his fingers. Plus, there's a language barrier, cultural differences, and the minor detail that we met while I was impersonating a homeless person. Those are fairly significant obstacles. Insurmountable? That depends. On what? Zahara picks up her tablet, scrolling to a map covered in green dots. On whether you're interested in expanding the Warm Spaces program to other companies. Samsung is inquiring. So are LG and Hyundai. Ji-hoon stares at the screen. You want to reform the entire chaebol system? I want to house every person who needs housing. The system reform is just methodology. And that would require a permanent consulting partnership with someone who understands both corporate culture and municipal policy. Someone who can navigate board meetings and city councils with equal effectiveness. Someone like us. Someone like us. As if on cue, Mrs. Kim approaches with 2 cups of tea. She's been volunteering as evening coordinator since finding her own apartment 2 weeks ago. Mr. Park, Miss Williams, the new residents are asking about job placement services. We'll meet with employment counselors tomorrow, Zahara says. Mrs. Kim, how was your first day at the publishing house? Wonderful. They want me to edit a poetry anthology. Mrs. Kim beams. 7 poets who experienced homelessness. Their voices deserve to be heard. Ji-hoon accepts the tea with both hands, the proper Korean way. Mrs. Kim, may I ask you something personal? Of course. That night when you first slept here, you asked what I learned from my experiment. What did you learn from teaching me? Mrs. Kim considers this carefully. I learned that dignity isn't something you give to people. It's something you recognize was always there. She gestures toward the warm space around them. These signs say, Warm Space 22106, but they really say, Humans welcome here. That's not charity. That's acknowledgement. A notification chimes on Zahara's tablet. The Busan location just opened. Full capacity on the first night. That's 15 cities now, Ji-hoon says. How many more requests? 47, plus international inquiries from Tokyo, Singapore, and Vancouver. Zahara shows him the list. The Seoul model is becoming the Asia-Pacific standard. And you're the architect of all of it. We're the architects. You provided the corporate framework, I provided the policy expertise, Mrs. Kim provided the reality check. Through the shelter windows, they can see Seoul's skyline glittering in the distance. Somewhere in those lights are warm offices where executives make decisions about quarterly profits. And down here, in converted conference rooms across the city, those same decisions translate into warm beds and hot meals. Zahara, Ji-hoon says quietly, about the complications. Yes, I've been thinking about what you said, about dignity being recognition, not charity. And I think I've been approaching this whole thing wrong. The media attention, the cultural differences, the business partnership, I've been treating them as obstacles to overcome instead of realities to acknowledge. Zahara sets down her cup. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to stop performing solutions and start implementing them. With you, professionally, and he takes a breath, and personally if you're interested. That's a very Korean way to ask someone out. Is it working? That depends. Are you asking as the CEO who owns 12 warm spaces, or as Jin who sat in the rain learning about dignity? I'm asking as Ji-hoon Park, who's still learning but wants to keep getting the lessons right. Mrs. Kim quietly retreats to give them privacy, but her smile lingers in the space between them. Outside, the city continues its restless pulse of ambition and achievement. But inside the warm space, time moves differently. Here, success is measured in safe sleep and morning coffee, in names remembered and choices respected. Here, dignity costs nothing and changes everything. 2 months after the first spike came down, Ji-hoon walks through downtown Seoul at midnight, seeing his city with completely different eyes. Where hostile architecture once created barriers, small communities have formed. People share newspapers on benches designed for sitting. Street musicians perform near building entrances that welcome listeners instead of dispersing them. The numbers tell the story. 47 people found stable housing through warm space programs. 0 violent incidents at any location. 12 other corporations have adopted similar policies. And Mrs. Kim's poetry anthology just won the Seoul Literary Prize. Ji-hoon's phone buzzes with a message from Zahara. Meet me at Myeongdong, same corner where this started. He finds her standing in the exact spot where she first approached him, but now there's a small memorial plaque on the building wall, in recognition of those who sleep without shelter. May this space welcome, rather than exclude. The city installed it yesterday, Zahara explains. Mrs. Kim wrote the inscription. It's perfect. It's a beginning. She shows him a thick folder marked Phase 2 Proposals. The mayor wants to expand beyond emergency shelters, transitional housing, job training, mental health services, addiction treatment, comprehensive support instead of temporary relief. How comprehensive? 5-year commitment. 120 million budget. Partnership between municipal government, private corporations, and community organizations. Ji-hoon whistles. That's not a program. That's a transformation. Exactly. The question is whether Park Industries is ready to lead it. Are you ready to design it? Zahara opens the folder, revealing detailed architectural plans, policy frameworks, and implementation timelines. I've been working on this for 6 weeks, but it can't be just Park Industries. We need Samsung, LG, Hyundai, all the major chaebols committed to systemic change. You want me to convince my competitors to spend millions on social policy? I want you to show them that dignity is profitable. Lower security costs, tax incentives, positive brand recognition, early compliance with housing legislation. It's good business wrapped in moral obligation. They walk toward the Han River, passing warm spaces that glow like beacons in the urban landscape. Each location shows signs of community, bulletin boards with job postings, small libraries, chess sets left for anyone to use. The shareholders are happy? Zahara asks. Surprised, but happy. Corporate social responsibility scores up 30%. Customer loyalty metrics at all-time highs. And we're saving $2 million annually on security contracts alone. Because you're not paying guards to move people along anymore. Because we're not creating problems that require moving people along. They stop at the bridge overlook, where the city spreads below them like a constellation of possibilities. In the distance, the Park Industries building rises against the sky, its ground floor glowing with warm light. Zahara, there's something I need to tell you. She turns to face him, and he sees the same patient attention she gave him that first rainy night. The board wants to offer you Chief Social Policy Officer, Full executive position, corporate apartment, relocation package, and autonomy to implement Phase 2 citywide. That's unexpected. You've revolutionized how we think about corporate responsibility. You've proven that dignity generates measurable returns. And you've done it without compromising your principles or accepting performative gestures. What would the position involve? Everything you're already doing, but with unlimited budget and legal authority to bind the company to long-term commitments. Zahara leans against the bridge railing, considering. And personally, I'd like to spend more time learning how to implement solutions instead of just managing problems. Ji-hoon moves closer. With you. If you're interested in teaching a reformed CEO how to be a better human, that could take years. I was hoping it would. The kiss happens naturally, without performance or hesitation. When they separate, Soul continues its restless energy around them, but something fundamental has shifted. So that's a yes to the job offer? That's a yes to the partnership, professional and personal. Mrs. Kim will be pleased. She's been asking when you're going to stop being stubborn and admit you like each other. Mrs. Kim is very wise. They walk back through the city center, past buildings that no longer exclude, and spaces that welcome, rather than deter. The transformation isn't complete, won't ever be complete, but it's real and measurable and growing. At the Myeongdong warm space, they find Mrs. Kim coordinating the late-night shift change. She looks up when they enter, takes one look at their faces, and smiles. "About time," she says simply. As the city settles into its overnight rhythm, three people who found each other through rain and dignity plan the next phase of making Seoul a place where everyone belongs. Outside, the signs glow. Warm space, 22:06 arouse. Inside, the work continues. The National Assembly Auditorium holds 200 legislators, 50 journalists, and one nervous CEO who's about to do something unprecedented in Korean corporate culture: admit systematic failure and commit to specific remediation. Ji-hoon adjusts his tie at the podium, looking out at faces that range from skeptical to hopeful. In the front row, Zahara sits beside Mrs. Kim, both holding folders of documentation that will support every claim he's about to make. Honorable representatives, distinguished guests, fellow citizens, he begins, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I appear before you today to offer a formal apology on behalf of Park Industries for our role in Seoul's housing crisis. The room stirs. Corporate apologies in Korea are usually carefully worded non-admissions. This sounds different. For 15 years, Park Industries has systematically installed architecture designed to prevent homeless citizens from resting on our properties. We have spent millions creating discomfort for our most vulnerable neighbors while spending additional millions on marketing campaigns about social responsibility. Representative Kim Jong-ho raises his hand. Mr. Park, are you admitting to deliberate discrimination? I am admitting to willful ignorance that functioned as deliberate discrimination. We knew our policies caused harm, and we chose profit over people. The journalists scribble frantically. This level of corporate accountability is unprecedented. The homeless citizens affected by our policies were not abstract statistics. They were Mrs. Kim, a literature professor who slept outside our headquarters for 7 months. They were Mr. Cho, a security guard who lost his apartment and continued working while homeless. They were 47 individuals with names, stories, and dignity that we ignored. Ji-hoon clicks to his first slide. A map of Seoul showing Park Industries properties marked in red, shelter locations in green, and the gaps where services couldn't reach. Our hostile architecture created shelter deserts. our policies made surviving homelessness more difficult and escaping it nearly impossible. Representative Lee Min-jung leans forward. Mr. Park, what specific changes is Park Industries committing to? Complete removal of hostile architecture from all properties, implemented over the next 6 months. Conversion of unused commercial space to temporary shelter facilities. Partnership with municipal housing services to provide permanent supportive housing. And establishment of a $50 million foundation for Housing First initiatives. The chamber erupts in murmurs. $50 million is serious money. Additionally, Park Industries will work with other major corporations to adopt similar policies. We will share our implementation data, policy frameworks, and cost-benefit analyses freely with any company committed to housing justice. Zahara nods approvingly from the front row. This goes beyond their original discussions. Representative Park Sang-min, no relation, stands. Mr. Park, these are significant commitments. What guarantees do we have that Park Industries will follow through? You have the guarantee of public accountability and legal obligation. Ji-hoon clicks to his next slide, a detailed implementation timeline with quarterly benchmarks. Every commitment I've made today will be written into our corporate charter. Failure to meet these obligations will result in automatic board review and potential leadership changes. You're legally binding yourself to these policies? I'm legally binding Park Industries to these policies, regardless of future leadership changes. Mrs. Kim stands from the audience. May I speak? The chamber moderator looks surprised, but nods. I am Kim Soon-ja, the literature professor Mr. Park mentioned. 7 months ago, I slept on cardboard outside Park Industries headquarters, while executives debated social responsibility budgets above my head. Her voice carries clearly through the chamber. Today I have permanent housing, meaningful work, and dignity restored through policies that cost less than 1 quarterly marketing campaign. She turns to address Ji-hoon directly. Mr. Park learned something on the street that cannot be taught in business school. That human worth is not conditional on economic productivity. But his real education came from choosing to act on that knowledge despite significant personal and professional cost. The chamber is completely silent. This apology is not performance. It is accountability. And accountability is the foundation of trust. As Mrs. Kim sits down, Representative Kim Jung-ho addresses Ji-hoon again. Mr. Park, what do you say to critics who claim this is elaborate public relations? I say results matter more than rhetoric. In 3 months, you can visit our warm spaces, review our spending reports, and interview the people we're housing. Judge us on outcomes, not announcements. And if other corporations don't follow your lead? Ji-hoon glances at Zahara, who nods almost imperceptibly. Then we'll continue leading by example. But I believe Korean business leaders are capable of moral leadership when presented with practical frameworks for implementing it. Representative Lee raises her final question. Mr. Park, what would you say to your former self, the executive who approved hostile architecture policies? Ji-hoon pauses, considering. I would say that dignity is not expensive. It's just never been properly budgeted. And I would ask him the same question Zahara Williams asked me. Does it matter who owns the building if someone needs shelter from the rain? As the formal session concludes, journalists rush toward the exits to file stories. But Ji-hoon remains at the podium, accepting questions from representatives who want specific details about implementation timelines, legal frameworks, and replication strategies. An hour later, as the auditorium empties, Zahara approaches with Mrs. Kim. How do you feel? Zahara asks. Terrified and relieved. We just committed to spending $50 million on something that's never been tried at this scale. And? And Mrs. Kim deserves a city that works for everyone, not just property owners. Mrs. Kim smiles. Mr. Park, may I give you some advice? Always. Stop calling it expensive. Start calling it investment. The return will be a soul, where no one has to teach CEOs about dignity, because dignity is built into the infrastructure. As they leave the assembly building, Ji-hoon realizes that the most expensive lesson in business wasn't learning to apologize. It was learning to act before apology became necessary. But transformation has to start somewhere. And Mrs. Kim finally has a city that recognizes her worth. The quarterly board meeting happens in the newly renovated Park Industries conference room, the same space that served as the first warm shelter. The mahogany table has been replaced with a circular arrangement that accommodates not just board members, but resident advisors, community representatives, and policy experts. Zahara, now officially Chief Social Policy Officer, presents the 3-month impact report with slides that tell stories in numbers. Direct housing placements, 47 individuals. Transitional shelter utilization, 93% capacity average. Employment connections, 32 job placements, 18 skills training enrollments. Board member Kim Sung-ho, the former skeptic, reviews the financial data. Operating costs came in 12% under budget. Security expenses down 68%. Insurance claims down 45%. What about the intangibles? Asks Director Lim. Ji-hoon stands to address the room. Brand recognition up 37% among our target demographics. Employee satisfaction at all-time highs. Our staff actively recruits friends to work for a company that aligns with their values. And we've had acquisition inquiries from 3 international firms specifically interested in our social policy frameworks. Mrs. Kim, now serving as Community Relations Advisor, adds her perspective. The 47 people housed represent 47 sets of skills, experiences, and contributions returning to productive participation in Seoul's economy. Mr. Cho now manages overnight operations at 3 warm space locations. Ms. Park, no relation, completed her nursing certification and works at Seoul National Hospital. Mr. Lee started a small catering business that provides meals to 4 shelter locations. Chairman Park, who initially opposed the transformation, has become its strongest advocate. Gentlemen, we've discovered that corporate social responsibility is not an expense category. It's a growth strategy. Zahara clicks to her next slide, a map showing warm space locations across Seoul, with green indicators for permanent housing placements and blue indicators for employment connections. The model is replicating beyond our original scope. Samsung has committed to 15 locations. LG is implementing in Busan and Daegu. Hyundai is developing automotive-specific job training programs at their facilities. What's the total corporate investment now? Asks board member Park. $137 million across 8 companies. But the municipal cost savings exceed corporate spending by 40%. We're not subsidizing housing policy. We're making it profitable. Director Lim scrolls through his tablet. The international inquiries, are they licensing opportunities? Consulting opportunities, Zahara corrects. Cities want expertise, not franchises. Tokyo is implementing a pilot program. Singapore is adapting the model for tropical climate conditions. Vancouver is integrating it with their existing Housing First initiatives. Ji-hoon moves to the window overlooking the plaza below, where the former hostel architecture has been replaced with community gardens, chess tables, and small performance areas. Even in the rain, people gather instead of dispersing. The question for this board is whether we continue leading this transformation or hand off responsibility to others. What do you recommend? Chairman Park asks. I recommend we double down. Expand to rural areas. Develop job training programs that match shelter residents with specific corporate needs. Create pathway programs from temporary housing to permanent employment within park industries and partner companies. Board member Kim looks up from his calculations. That would be a 5-year commitment. Significant budget allocation. What happens if economic conditions change? Mrs. Kim speaks from her corner of the room. Board members, may I ask you something? How many of you have children? 8 hands raise. If your child was homeless, how long would you want corporations to maintain their commitment to helping them? 1 quarter? 1 fiscal year? Or until they had permanent housing and dignified work? The room falls silent. These 47 people are someone's children. The question is not whether economic conditions might change, but whether your commitment to human dignity is conditional on quarterly performance. Director Lim clears his throat. Mrs. Kim, that's a powerful point. But boards have fiduciary responsibility. To shareholders, yes, but also to stakeholders. And the people sleeping in your building's shadows are stakeholders whether you acknowledge them or not. Zahara pulls up her final slide. Financial projections showing 5-year costs, savings, and revenue generation through the expanded program. The economic support expansion, corporate tax benefits, reduced security and maintenance costs, improved brand positioning, and access to dedicated worker pools trained in high-demand skills, plus compliance with housing legislation that becomes mandatory in 18 months. We're not just doing good, Ji-hoon adds. We're doing good business. Chairman Park calls for the formal vote. All in favor of 5-year expansion of the Dignity Initiative? 8 hands raise immediately. The 9th, Director Lim, hesitates, then joins the consensus. Unanimous approval. Ms. Williams, congratulations on securing budget for the most ambitious corporate social policy in Korean history. As the meeting concludes, the board members file out discussing implementation details and timeline coordination. But Mrs. Kim remains in her chair, looking thoughtful. Mrs. Kim, Ji-hoon approaches. Is everything all right? I was thinking about numbers. 47 people housed sounds significant until you remember there are still thousands sleeping rough every night in Seoul. But it's 47 more than 6 months ago. Yes, and it's proof that transformation is possible. Mrs. Kim stands, gathering her papers. Mr. Park, what did you learn from managing your first crisis as CEO? That dignity scales. Individual compassion becomes policy change, becomes systematic transformation. The question is not whether we can afford to help, it's whether we can afford not to. And personally, what did you learn about leadership? Ji-hoon considers this. That the best leaders are students first. You and Zahara taught me more about business in 3 months than I learned in 10 years of executive education. Because we taught you to ask different questions. What questions should I be asking now? Mrs. Kim smiles. The same question Zahara asked you in the rain. How can we help? But now you have the resources to implement the answers. As evening settles over Seoul, the warm spaces across the city begin their nightly routine. 47 people sleep indoors tonight who wouldn't have 6 months ago. And tomorrow, the number will be higher. Dignity, it turns out, is infinitely scalable. The proposal comes at 6 a.m. in the Park Industries executive break room, not the romantic setting Ji-hoon had planned. Zahara arrives early to review overnight reports from the 12 warm space locations and finds him already there with coffee and a small velvet box on the counter between them. That's either a very expensive USB drive or you're about to make this morning complicated, she says, accepting the coffee. Complicated how? Well, if it's a proposal, I need to tell you about the job offer from the UN Human Settlements Program. If it's a USB drive, I just need more coffee. Ji-hoon picks up the box. It's definitely not a USB drive. Then I definitely need more coffee. She sits across from him at the small table where they've shared countless early morning planning sessions. Through the windows, Seoul awakens with its usual organized chaos, but the break room feels like an island of possibility. The UN offer? He asks. Global Housing Policy Advisor, based in Geneva. 18-month contract to develop urban dignity frameworks for implementation in 12 cities across 4 continents. That's incredible. Congratulations. I haven't accepted yet. Why not? Zahara gestures toward the window, where the warm space signs are visible in the distance. Because we're not finished here. The Phase 2 expansion, the corporate replication program, the legislative advocacy. Seoul could become the model for every major city in Asia. And Geneva could become the model for the world. Geneva is policy development. Seoul is policy implementation. I'm better at building things than writing reports about things. Ji-hoon opens the velvet box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small diamond. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that screams chaebol wealth. I was planning something elaborate. Restaurant overlooking the Han River, string quartet, helicopter ride, the whole Korean CEO romantic gesture. I hate elaborate gestures. I know. That's why I'm asking here, where we actually work, at 6 a.m. when we're both completely ourselves. Zahara picks up the ring, examining it in the morning light. What exactly are you asking? I'm asking if you want to build a life together while building policy that matters. I'm asking if you're interested in partnership on every level, professional, personal, permanent. And the UN offer is an incredible opportunity that you should seriously consider, even if you accept this. He gestures to the ring. Marriage doesn't mean abandoning career ambitions. It doesn't? Not in this marriage. I married a policy consultant because I need a partner who challenges systems and creates solutions. Taking that away would be like asking you to marry someone other than who you are. Zahara slips the ring onto her finger. Perfect fit. How did you know my size? Mrs. Kim helped. Apparently, she's been expecting this proposal for months. Mrs. Kim has opinions about our relationship? Mrs. Kim has opinions about everything. Most of them are right. The ring catches the morning light as Zahara spreads her hands on the table. So, if I accept this proposal, what does that mean practically? It means we figure out how to build the life we want while doing the work that matters. If that includes 18 months in Geneva developing global policy, we make it work. If it includes staying in Seoul to complete the transformation we started, we make that work too. You'd move to Geneva? I'd move anywhere that lets us continue building things together. And Park Industries will survive with excellent management. The Dignity Initiative is institutionalized now. The board, the staff, the community partnerships, they don't depend on me anymore. Zahara stands, walking to the window. Below, the first warm space residents are beginning their morning routines, checking out of temporary shelter and heading to jobs, interviews, and training programs. Ji-hoon, do you remember what I told you about dignity that first night? Name, permission, choice. Right. So I need you to ask me properly. He joins her at the window. Zahara Williams, will you marry me? Yes. Just like that? Just like that. But I have conditions. Such as, first, no elaborate wedding. Something simple that focuses on commitment rather than performance. Agreed. Second, Mrs. Kim gets to plan the reception. She's been talking about it for weeks. Also agreed. Third, we take the UN offer. Together. Seoul will be here when we get back, and the model will be stronger for having global validation. Ji-hoon stares. You want to move to Geneva? I want to expand Seoul to Geneva, Tokyo, Singapore, Vancouver, and anywhere else that needs to learn how dignity scales. We've proven the concept works here. Now we prove it works everywhere. That's not marriage. That's international expansion. That's marriage to a policy consultant. As they kiss in the early morning light, Seoul continues its transformation around them. The warm spaces operate smoothly. The corporate partnerships generate measurable results. And Mrs. Kim probably already knows about the engagement before they do. 6 months later, Ji-hoon and Zahara stand in the Incheon Airport departure lounge, boarding passes for Geneva in hand. The Park Industries Dignity Initiative continues under Mrs. Kim's community advisory leadership and Chairman Park's strategic oversight. Any regrets? Zahara asks as they wait to board. About Geneva? About marriage? About turning corporate social responsibility into actual social change? About all of it. Only one. Which is, I wish I'd asked your name sooner. As their flight departs Seoul, the city spreads below them like a constellation of possibilities. Somewhere in those lights, warm spaces glow with welcome. Somewhere in those buildings, corporations are learning to measure dignity alongside profit. And somewhere in the future, more cities are waiting to discover what happens when business leaders learn to ask the right questions. The transformation continues. 6 months after Geneva, Ji-hoon and Zahara return to Seoul for the inauguration of the External Council, an independent oversight body that will govern corporate social policy across all participating companies. The ceremony takes place in the renovated National Assembly building, with representatives from 12 nations observing Korean private sector innovation in social governance. Mrs. Kim, now Director of Community Relations for the Seoul Housing Coalition, addresses the assembled crowd of corporate executives, government officials, and international observers. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to formalize something unprecedented: voluntary corporate accountability to external community oversight. The External Council consists of 7 members, 3 formerly homeless individuals who have achieved housing stability, 2 academic experts in urban policy, 1 municipal government representative, and 1 international observer from the UN Human Settlements Program. Chairman Park, representing the corporate coalition, approaches the podium for the formal commitment ceremony. The 12 participating companies, Park Industries, Samsung, LG, Hyundai, SK Group, Lotte, CJ Group, Doosan, Hanjin, KT, POSCO, and Amora Pacific, hereby commit to annual review and binding accountability to the External Council for all housing-related social policies. The legal framework is revolutionary. Companies submit annual reports not just to shareholders, but to community representatives with power to recommend policy changes, budget reallocations, and leadership accountability measures. Zahara, speaking as international policy advisor, explains the global implications. In Geneva, we documented Seoul's model for implementation in 47 cities across 6 continents. The External Council framework addresses the fundamental question of corporate social responsibility. Responsible to whom? Representative Kim Jong-ho, now chairing the National Assembly Housing Committee, addresses the constitutional significance. This is not government regulation of private enterprise. This is private enterprise voluntarily accepting community governance of social impact. It represents evolution in capitalist accountability. The first External Council vote addresses the expansion question. Should the model extend beyond housing policy to environmental sustainability, labor relations, and international supply chain ethics? Council member Park Soon-ja, formerly homeless, now Seoul National University social work graduate student, presents the community perspective. Housing was our pilot program because homelessness is visible, measurable, and morally urgent. But the dignity framework applies to all corporate decisions that affect community welfare. Environmental degradation makes people homeless. Labor exploitation makes people homeless. Supply chain injustice makes people homeless. Everything connects. The vote is unanimous. Expansion approved. Ji-hoon, now serving as CEO of Park Industries and president of the Corporate Dignity Coalition, addresses the implications for business leadership. We began this transformation because I spent one night learning about humiliation and discovered that dignity is profitable. Today, we're institutionalizing that learning across industries that employ millions and serve billions. What's the measurable impact so far? Asked Dr. Chen Wei, the UN observer. Zahara projects the numbers. 2,300 individuals housed permanently. 4,700 employed through dignity-centered job training programs. 12 companies reporting improved financial performance correlated with social policy investment. 0 reported incidents of community conflict at any warm space location. And corporate resistance? Minimal, once companies understood the cost-benefit analysis. Dignity generates loyalty, reduces security expenses, improves brand recognition, attracts talent, and ensures compliance with emerging social governance legislation. Mrs. Kim takes the podium for the final address. 5 years ago, I slept on cardboard outside Park Industries headquarters while executives debated social responsibility 40 floors above me. Today, I serve on the external council that holds those executives accountable to their neighbors. She pauses, looking out at the assembled crowd. This transformation began with 3 words. What's your name? It began with recognition that dignity exists before profit, not because of it. And it proves that capitalism can evolve to serve human flourishing instead of just capital accumulation. The applause is sustained and genuine. As the ceremony concludes, international delegations schedule implementation visits. The Seoul model has generated policy tourism. Cities sending teams to study warm space operations, external council governance structures, and corporate accountability frameworks. That evening, Ji-hoon and Zahara walk through Myeongdong, past the memorial plaque where their partnership began. The streets show 5 years of systematic change. Benches designed for comfort, buildings that welcome rather than exclude, warm spaces that glow like beacons of community care. What's next? Zahara asks. Scale, depth, permanence. Ji-hoon counts on his fingers. The Environmental Council launches next quarter. Labor Relations Council the quarter after that. International Supply Chain Council next year. And personally? Personally, I think Mrs. Kim was right about the connections. Housing, environment, labor, supply chain. It's all one system. Either we build dignity into all of it, or we've just created more elegant ways to exploit people. They stop at the original warm space, now permanently housed in the Park Industries building's ground floor. Through the windows, they can see the evening shift beginning. Residents checking in, volunteers preparing meals, community coordinators reviewing job placement progress. Do you ever miss the simplicity? Zahara asks. When it was just about removing spikes and opening warming centers? Do you? Sometimes. But then I remember that Mrs. Kim deserves more than simple solutions. She deserves systematic change. A notification chimes on Ji-hoon's phone. First external council recommendation approved. Mandatory living wage for all contract workers across participating companies, effective immediately. And it begins, he says, showing Zahara the message. It continues, she corrects. It began that night in the rain when you learned to ask someone's name. As Seoul settles into its evening rhythm around them, the External Council's first policy change ripples through 12 major corporations, affecting thousands of workers who will never know that their improved wages began with a conversation about dignity between a CEO and a consultant on a rainy street corner. Transformation, it turns out, has no end point, only deepening commitment to the possibility that business can serve human flourishing. 2 years after the External Council's establishment, the most innovative warm space opens in Yeong District, a 24-hour food court staffed entirely by formerly homeless individuals who've completed culinary training programs. The space serves 3 functions: restaurant, job training center, and community gathering place where dignity is served alongside kimchi jjigae. Ji-hoon and Zahara attend the opening night celebration, watching Mrs. Kim, now Chef Kim, command the kitchen with the same precision she once brought to literature editing. Her restaurant, Second Chapter, specializes in comfort food that reminds people of home. "Order up," Chef Kim calls, sliding a tray of bulgogi bowls across the pass. "Table 7, extra banchan for the gentleman in the blue coat." The gentleman in question is Mr. Cho, the former security guard who now manages 3 warm space locations and stops by Second Chapter most evenings after his rounds. Tonight he's brought his teenage daughter, who's home from university and hearing these stories for the first time. "Dad, you really lived here?" she asks, looking around at the bustling restaurant. "Not here specifically, but in places like this, before Mr. Park and Miss Zahara figured out how to make buildings work for people instead of against them. And now you run these programs? Now I help people navigate the same path I took: temporary shelter, job training, permanent housing, meaningful work. It's replicable when the systems are designed right." At another table, Dr. Park Soon-ja, the former council member who completed her PhD in social work, interviews residents for her research on dignity-centered economic development. Her dissertation examines how the Seoul model challenges traditional assumptions about poverty, productivity, and social value. "What would you want policymakers to understand?" she asks her interview subject, a woman in her 50s who recently completed electrician certification. "That we were always capable. We just needed infrastructure that supported capability instead of punishing vulnerability." Ji-hoon overhears the conversation and thinks about the evolution of his own understanding. 5 years ago, he would have seen homelessness as individual failure requiring charity. Now he understands it as systematic exclusion requiring policy change. Zahara joins him at their corner table, carrying 2 bowls of Chef Kim's famous gamjatang. "How are the international replication programs going?" "Better than expected. Tokyo's warm space network is fully operational. Singapore is implementing the food court model in 3 districts. Vancouver is adapting the External Council framework for environmental policy oversight." Resistance? Less than anticipated. Turns out dignity is a universal concept, even if the implementation details vary by culture. They're interrupted by a commotion near the kitchen. Chef Kim emerges with a birthday cake for one of the regular customers, a man celebrating 6 months of stable housing and his new job as a subway maintenance supervisor. "Speech!" someone calls out. The man stands awkwardly, not used to being the center of attention. "I don't know what to say. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in Dongdaemun Station. Tonight I'm eating birthday cake surrounded by friends." He pauses, looking around the restaurant. This place doesn't just serve food, it serves hope. And hope, it turns out, is filling. The applause is warm and sustained. Later, as the evening crowd thins, Ji-hoon and Zahara help with closing duties, a routine they've maintained since the first warm space. There's something grounding about wiping tables and stacking chairs after board meetings and policy conferences. "Zahara," Ji-hoon says while loading the dishwasher, "do you remember what Mrs. Kim asked me that first night? About what I learned from my experiment? That you were performing homelessness while she was experiencing it." "Right." But I've been thinking about what the real lesson was, which is that dignity isn't something you discover when you hit bottom. It's something you recognize was always there. Our job isn't creating dignity. It's removing barriers to dignity. Chef Kim emerges from the kitchen, untying her apron. Mr. Park, Miss Zahara, thank you for staying to help clean. Thank you for creating a place where help feels like community instead of charity, Zahara replies. What's next for second chapter? Ji-hoon asks. Expansion, 2 more locations, partnerships with culinary schools, and a catering business that employs warm space graduates. Chef Kim hangs up her apron with satisfaction. Plus, we're documenting recipes and methods for replication in other cities. The Dignity Food Court franchise? The Dignity Food Court movement. Franchise implies ownership. Movement implies participation. As they lock up the restaurant and head into the Seoul night, the city around them continues its transformation. Warm spaces glow in buildings across the metropolitan area. External councils meet in corporate boardrooms. And somewhere, policymakers from other cities take notes on how dignity scales when systems are designed to support it. 5 years, Zahara observes, watching the late-night crowd navigate streets that welcome rather than exclude. From one conversation in the rain to systematic change across multiple industries. From asking someone's name to rebuilding how corporations think about community accountability. They walk hand in hand through Myeongdong, past the memorial plaque where their partnership began, toward the home they've built together in a city that now builds dignity into its infrastructure. Behind them, second chapter's warm light spills onto the sidewalk like an invitation. Ahead, Seoul continues becoming a place where everyone belongs. 5 years after the first spike was removed, Seoul hosts the International Conference on Corporate Social Governance, bringing together business leaders, policymakers, and community advocates from 60 cities across 6 continents. The opening ceremony takes place in Olympic Park, where outdoor screens broadcast the proceedings to gathering places across the metropolitan area. Ji-hoon, now recognized globally as the architect of dignity-centered capitalism, delivers the keynote address to an audience that includes CEOs, mayors, and formerly homeless individuals who serve on external councils in their home cities. 5 years ago, I spent one night on the streets of Seoul and learned that humiliation is profitable, but dignity is transformative. The audience, seated on benches designed for comfort rather than deterrence, listens attentively as Ji-hoon traces the evolution from individual revelation to systematic change. The Seoul model began with 3 principles: ask people's names, request permission before acting, and offer choices instead of charity. Today, those principles govern corporate policies that affect millions of people across industries, from housing to environmental protection to supply chain ethics. Zahara, now director of the Global Dignity Institute, presents the quantitative outcomes. The numbers tell a story of unprecedented transformation. 8,400 individuals permanently housed through warm space programs, 12,700 employed through dignity-centered job training, 47 corporations across 12 countries implementing external council governance, 0 reported community conflicts at any participating location. The economic data is equally compelling. Participating companies report average revenue increases of 23%, employee retention improvements of 34%, and brand loyalty scores up 41%. Dignity, it turns out, is not just morally correct, it's financially optimal. Mrs. Kim, now Dr. Kim, having completed her PhD in literature and social policy, addresses the philosophical implications. We've proven that capitalism can evolve beyond extraction toward regeneration. But evolution requires continuous commitment to learning, adapting, and centering human flourishing in every decision. During the afternoon breakout sessions, participants tour Seoul's transformation sites, warm spaces that operate as community centers, corporate buildings designed for public access, food courts staffed by formerly homeless individuals, and external council offices where community representatives hold corporate executives accountable to measurable dignity metrics. The most powerful session takes place at the original Myeongdong location, where the memorial plaque now reads, "Here began the conversation that changed Seoul. May every city learn to ask, 'What's your name?'" Conference delegate Maria Santos from São Paulo raises her hand during the Q&A. How do you respond to critics who say the Seoul model only works in Korea's specific cultural context? Dr. Kim answers first. We've documented successful adaptations in Tokyo, Singapore, Vancouver, Detroit, and Stockholm. The specific methods vary, but the core principle, centering human dignity in corporate decision-making, translates across cultures. The resistance points? Asks Delegate James Miller from London. Zahara responds. Always the same three: concerns about cost, liability, and shareholder response. But we have 5 years of data proving that dignity-centered policies reduce costs, minimize liability, and improve shareholder returns. CEO Delegate Sarah Chen from Toronto asks the implementation question. How do you begin this transformation in a city where corporations are skeptical and government support is limited? Ji-hoon stands to address this directly. Start small. Find one company willing to pilot warm spaces. Remove hostile architecture from one building. House 10 people permanently. Then document everything and show the results to other business leaders. And if that one company is yours, Chen presses, then you lead by example and accept that leadership requires taking risks other people aren't ready to take yet. As the conference day concludes, participants gather for the evening session at Second Chapter, Chef Kim's restaurant that has become the unofficial embassy of the dignity movement. The space buzzes with conversations in multiple languages as corporate executives, policy experts, and community advocates share meals and plan collaborative implementations. At one table, former Park Industries board member Kim Sung-ho discusses supply chain ethics with a delegation from Bangladesh. At another, Mr. Cho explains warm space operations to mayors from 3 African cities. The conversations cross every boundary of industry, geography, and economic development level. 5 years ago, could you have imagined this? Zahara asks Ji-hoon as they watch the international collaboration unfolding around them. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine talking to a homeless person without filming it for social media. Now we're hosting global conferences about dignity-centered capitalism. And personally, I wake up every morning married to the smartest person I know, working on problems that matter, in a city that has learned to ask people's names before making decisions that affect their lives. Dr. Kim approaches their table, carrying a bottle of champagne, and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose life work has found its proper scale. Mr. Park, Miss Zahara, may I propose a toast? Of course. To the question that started everything. What's your name? And to the answer that sustains everything. Dignity is not negotiable. As glasses raise across the restaurant, the sound of international collaboration fills the air. Outside, Seoul's transformed streets welcome the evening crowd. Warm spaces prepare for their nightly routine. And somewhere, in cities across the globe, other business leaders are learning to see homelessness not as individual failure, but as systematic exclusion, requiring systematic solutions. The conversation that began in the rain has become a movement. And the movement has no endpoint, only deepening commitment to the possibility that every city can learn what Seoul discovered, that asking someone's name is the first step toward building a world where everyone belongs. The letter arrives on a Tuesday morning in March, hand-delivered to Ji-hoon's office by a courier who waits for no reply. The envelope bears no return address, but the handwriting is immediately recognizable. Careful, educated, the penmanship of someone who learned to write when such things mattered. Dear Mr. Park and Miss Williams, 5 years ago tonight, you taught me that dignity has 3 steps. Ask someone's name, request permission before acting, and offer choices instead of charity. Tonight, I am writing to tell you about the 4th step, which you discovered, but perhaps have not yet named. The 4th step is remembering. Yesterday, I visited the Myeongdong corner, where Zahara first approached you in the rain. The memorial plaque is surrounded by flowers left by people whose names you will never know, but whose lives were changed by the conversation that happened there. I counted 47 flowers, one for each person initially housed through the Warm Space program, but also one for each city now implementing dignity-centered policies, and one for each corporation that has learned to measure human worth alongside shareholder value. The 4th step is remembering that transformation begins with individual recognition, but continues through institutional commitment. You asked my name on a rainy night when you had nothing. Now you remember the names of thousands of people who have something because you learned to ask. Tonight, Seoul's Warm Spaces will house 2,847 individuals. Tomorrow, 12 of them will move into permanent housing. Next week, 34 will start new jobs. These are not statistics. These are neighbors whose names appear on lease agreements and employment contracts because 2 people learned that dignity is not expensive. It is just properly budgeted. I am writing from my new office at Seoul National University, where I serve as Professor of Applied Social Policy. My students, many of them formerly homeless individuals who completed degree programs through dignity-centered educational initiatives, are conducting research on corporate social governance models for implementation in 47 additional cities. The number 47 appears frequently in our work. It represents not just the first people housed, but the expanding possibility that every person deserves recognition, every voice merits attention, and every story can contribute to systematic change. 5 years ago, you created space for my story to matter. Tonight, thousands of people are creating space for other stories to matter. This is how dignity scales. Not through charity, but through infrastructure. Not through individual compassion, but through institutional transformation. I am enclosing the original dignity map I drew for Jin that first night, now framed and displayed in the university's Corporate Social Responsibility Research Center. Students study it not as historical artifact, but as proof that hand-drawn solutions can become policy frameworks that change cities. The map shows something you may not have noticed. The route I outlined for you that night was circular. It began at the corner where we met, and returned there after visiting every resource location in Seoul. I designed it that way intentionally, because dignity is not a destination. It is a practice that requires returning again and again to the question, how can we help? You have returned to that question daily for 5 years. Now other cities, other corporations, and other leaders are learning to return to it as well. The 4th step of dignity is remembering that the work is never complete. There will always be corners where people wait in the rain for someone to ask their name. There will always be systems that require transformation. There will always be opportunities to choose recognition over extraction. But there will also always be proof that change is possible. Tonight, as Seoul's Warm Spaces welcome another evening's residents, as external councils meet in corporate boardrooms, as dignity-centered food courts serve comfort food to anyone who needs it, remember that transformation began with the simplest human gesture, one person asking another person's name. And remember that it continues because you learned the difference between performing concern and implementing solutions. Thank you for asking my name. Thank you for using yours to create systems where other names matter. Thank you for proving that dignity is not just an individual value, but an institutional commitment that can change cities. 5 years later, Seoul has learned to ask people's names before making decisions that affect their lives. The fourth step is teaching other cities to remember how to ask. With admiration and gratitude, Dr. Kim Soon-ja, Professor of Applied Social Policy, Seoul National University. P.S. Zahara's dignity map now hangs in 47 offices in 12 countries. Hand-drawn solutions, it turns out, scale beautifully. Ji-hoon sets down the letter and looks through his office window at the Seoul skyline. Somewhere in those lights are warm spaces, dignity-centered workplaces, corporate boardrooms where community representatives hold business leaders accountable, and apartments where people sleep safely who once slept in doorways. His phone buzzes with a text from Zahara. Conference call with Vancouver's external counsel in 10 minutes. Are you ready to teach another city how to ask people's names? He responds immediately. Always ready. Some lessons are worth repeating. As evening settles over Seoul, the warm spaces across the city begin their nightly routine. Signs illuminate. Warm space. 2206 Zeward. Doors open. Names are asked, permission is requested, choices are offered. The conversation that began in the rain continues in 47 cities, in boardrooms and community centers, in policy documents and personal interactions. Dignity, it turns out, is infinitely replicable. And Seoul remembers how it learned to ask the question that changed everything. What's your name? Outside, the city pulses with the energy of 8 million people who belong to a place that finally learned to welcome rather than exclude, to ask rather than assume, to offer choices rather than charity. The most expensive lesson in business became the most valuable transformation in urban policy. That human dignity is not a cost center, but the foundation of sustainable prosperity. And it all began with someone learning to ask a stranger's name in the rain.